What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode. Steelers Breakdown Podcast. Nick Farabaugh here. Let's talk about cuts. Let's talk about roster battles. Let's talk about it all because cut down day is a little under 24 hours from us. We have already seen 11 cuts from the Pittsburgh Steelers. No one too shocking. So nothing crazy there. And I will expect not only crazy cuts, but roster movement from the outside. But let's talk about what we can expect inside first. These last five spots. So I put out a 53-man roster projection today, and I had to make a few tough decisions. First of all, quarterback, running back, not really hard. I think receiver is where we start to get into a little bit of dicey territory. So let's talk about this. How many wide receivers are they going to keep on the initial 53? I think that's the big question. I think they add somebody from the outside. Could be Brandon Ayuk, could be John Mechie, could be Robert Woods, could be somebody completely off the radar. I think they will add somebody to this room. So this is one of those positions where the initial 53 doesn't mean that it is the official wide receiver room for week one. And I don't think that's going to be the case. And we'll talk about later at corner either. But I think if I were projecting right now, it feels like to me that it's either going to be five or six. Six would have both Des Fitzpatrick and Scotty Miller on the team. I think if they only keep five, it will just be Des Fitzpatrick. Reason I think it's going to be Des Fitzpatrick, his gunner reps, his ability to catch the ball, his ability to block. He had some really big plays this preseason. You talk about his stats and what he did. I mean, it was essentially him just creating big play after big play. Five receptions for 130 yards. It's 26 yards per catch. Of course, he had that big catch against the Lions that went for 59, but he had more than that. He had a few really big catches uh, in this preseason. And so, he's showing an ability to go in there and wrap block. He's showing a willingness to go in there and dig out a defensive back. And then in play action, he's shown an ability to make plays down the field. And then he's a gunner and he tackles really well. And he went out of his way to ask Terrell Austin to get in there on defense and start doing tackling drills. I mean, that is initiative, and that's the type of initiative that coaches like. This guy's a coachable player. He brings value to multiple facets of the game, similar to how Miles Boykin did last year. He brings that to this team. So I feel like he'd be the guy I would keep if they keep five. Possible they keep six. I think if it's Scotty Miller versus Desmond Patrick, I think they only keep five. And again, I think we're going to see someone from the outside here come into this room. So more shakeup. At tight end, I'm pretty comfortable, convinced that the four, they will keep four, and it will be Muth, Washington, Hayward, and Pruitt. Offensive line, we get into a little bit of an interesting wrinkle here. Um, so Dylan Cook has a foot injury that is going to keep him out for several weeks. And he's probably going to go on injured reserve. So now I do want to remind people one of the new rules this year the NFL did approve was that during cutdown day, you can actually end up putting two guys on injured reserve and designating them to return. So they don't have to be out for the season. Like Nate Herbig, for example, was placed well before that period, and he is out for the season. Dylan Cook can be placed on this and not count against the initial 53. So he won't be on that. The question is, do they keep eight or nine on the initial 53? I think the top eight are locks. I think you keep obviously the five starters and then Anderson, McCormick, as well in there. So I mean, these guys feel like, and then whichever tackle, of course. I don't expect Troy Fautano, Roman Wilson, Jalen Warren, any of those guys to start on injured reserve to kick off the year. By the way, wanted to state that. So there are your eight. Question is, do they keep the ninth, being Ryan McCollum? Do they bring someone from the outside to be the ninth? I think that's going to be a question. They need tackle depth, and they also need help at center. But is that going to be on the practice squad or is that going to be on the 53 man? I'm not sure just yet. But my initial guess is that we are probably going to see somebody from the outside come in here, and I'm going to say it's probably going to be a center. So I think there's some options that will be out there. Uh, even just out on the market right now, Scott Quessenberry is a veteran that has played guard and center. So there are multiple options out there for them to explore there. Um, then we talk about defensive line. I keep seven here. I kept seven. I just don't know how you cut one of these guys. I get Isaiah Loudermilk, is probably seven of the seven. But he's really shown some pass rush juice that he never had. He's gonna struggle against double teams because he just plays really high. He's 6'7". Makes sense, but against certain schemes, he's a really strong run defender too. Specifically, when he is out there at 4 eye. So we'll see. I expect probably all seven of these guys to make the team. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to. Also, Liao has made himself a real lock. Lowry has played well in his return. And then Adams looks good too. And then obviously the top three are your starters. So this room is very deep. And I think, defensive linemen don't grow on trees. So I wouldn't cut a defensive lineman that you like. And I think Loudermilk is certainly an NFL roster worthy defensive lineman that can play in a rotation. So I think you let him make the roster. Outside linebacker could be interesting here with the Marvin Leal's now versatility that he can play outside or inside. You could make him the fourth outside backer. I just think Kyron Johnson has showed more than enough to be the guy on the team. He's right on that border, right, where you could cut him, but I probably wouldn't let him get through waivers. He's a really intriguing player. When you watch this guy play football, man, he's so explosive. He gets up the arc so fast. I personally just have a really hard time cutting a guy that's not only extremely good when he's rushing the passer, but I have a hard time cutting the guy when he's a quality specialty. So he brings utility to this team. So I would have him on my 53. And I think the better pass rush you have, plus with the special teams upside, I think it makes a ton of sense to keep DeMarvin Leal, as that tweener, but let Kyron Johnson be on the roster too. Inside backer, think they keep five here. I do. Mark Robinson has played his way onto this team. Tyler Matakevich is a pretty darn good special teamer. Obviously, the top three are locks, and Cole Holcomb's going to start on the pup list. So I think you keep Mark Robinson because honestly, you watch the tape, he's keying things better. He's coming downhill, playing the run really well. He's obviously a quality special team. So you have two different things there. You could have two inside linebackers. Now, maybe keeping two inside linebackers makes Kyron Johnson expendable. That could be something that pops up here. So we'll see. And obviously, if you add so many players from the outside, whether that's at receiver to keep six, 11 DBs, whatever you want to do, that ninth all lineman, there's going to be only so many spots you have. So who's going to be on the chopping block? I think that would be a significant question. But I just have a hard time cutting Kyron Johnson. And I have a hard time cutting either of these five inside linebackers that I'm talking about. The secondary, this is a very interesting position. So let's talk about this. First of all, let's go to the easy part of this, which is the safety room. So the safety room, and when I look at this, the top four are obviously locks. Killebrew's a lock for special teams. I think what it's going to be is going to be, do they keep Ryan Watts or not? I don't even think there's another guy that I would consider for this. More importantly, I would have a hard time cutting Ryan Watts. He's just been really rock solid. But I also look at this and say, man, what utility does he bring? If he's going to be a game day inactive, probably didn't do a ton on special teams and was only okay. I really like him as a safety and how he profiles there, but could you slip him through to practice squad? Maybe. Could also be put on injured reserve with that stinger. Maybe you can slip him through there. I would be a little worried about that on waivers and everything, but I think you can slip him through. But then again, you only have so many spots on injured reserve. Dylan Cook's gonna go on injured reserve because he's legitimately hurt now for a while. Maybe Jeremiah Moon does too. He's banged up. I mean, there's a few guys you have to consider those too. But Watts is a tough cut, but he's probably 54, 53. He's the last guy to make the team and the first one off it. He's a really hard cut if you're gonna make one. Corner is where things get real interesting. Man, Could be two guys coming in from the outside here. They could have a nickel and an outside corner here. Just haven't been impressed with Darius Rush. I just haven't. He struggled in camp. He hasn't been that good in the preseason games. And then you look at the slot position, and Thomas Graham and Beanie Bishop have been okay. Like let's be real here. These guys have been fine. They just haven't grabbed it and said, yes, that is a week one starter. And when you have their backgrounds, I think that is very, very important. And the reason that's very important is because when you watch guys like Rush and Graham and Bishop, you really need to have confidence in those guys to take on roles, bigger roles. I don't have confidence in Rush to even be a gunner. I think that puts him on the outs personally. And so you go get a gunner and a guy that can be backup outside depth because Corey Trice is your main backup outside guy. You trust him. He's had a really good camp. He's grabbed that position. He has stood out above everybody. That's grabbing that position. Outside corner depth could have been a big concern, and it maybe still is, but Trice has looked awesome. That slot corner position, Beanie's had some struggles. Thomas Graham has been decent, but not great. Both of those guys probably make the initial 53, but are they one of the cuts when the guys come in? I think it's possible. But I do think right now, I think Beanie Bishop's probably the week one starter. I think he's been better. I think he's a guy that fits a rundown role right away, so I can project him into a role immediately. So I do think Beanie Bishop and Thomas Graham both make the initial 53. But again, outside additions. I think we're going to see at least one or two at corner, a receiver, and maybe an offensive lineman. We're going to see Omar Khan wheeling and dealing a little bit out here because Steelers have some needs that they need to fill on this roster. And obviously, the specialists are going to be the specialists. So that's kind of the look at the roster and the tough cuts. You're going to have some tough decisions to make. And there could be some good players cut. I just wouldn't cut them from, positions where I value those, like good outside linebackers, good defensive linemen. They just don't grow on trees. So I think you keep guys like Loudermilk and Kyron Johnson around because those are positions of immense value. And that's exactly why you sneak Dylan Cook through injured reserve, right? Because this is a guy that has upside. He's athletic. And so really that's where it comes down to. I think the Steelers need to find a few positions where they look at and say, yes, that is the guy that we can trust week one, specifically at wide receiver and slot corner. I think they need that guy where they can trust them. And I have ideas for some guys. We saw John Mechie thrown out there as a trade idea. I just think someone from that Houston wide receivers room, man, Noah Brown, Robert Woods, et cetera, whoever it might be. I think those guys bring specific ingredients to the team, and more importantly, will upgrade that room. And so I think you've got to make that a trade, pick up on the wire, whatever it might be from the Texans. And then I think you look at corner, and there's a few corners out there, and that gunner role, that nickel role, that can make sense. We'll see exactly the names that maybe get cut. But I would search for a few of those guys and really try and go out and get them. Last year, like Desmond King jumped out, obviously, right out of the page at you. We'll see if there's a guy at one of those positions that really jumps out at you immediately. But the Steelers have some work to do, and they will get down to 53 and some tough decisions to make. So we will see what ends up happening with the Steelers. Folks, thank you for listening. If you are watching this, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notification bell. And if you are listening to this on a podcasting platform, make sure to leave a review. We'll be back tomorrow for Cut Down Day. Thanks for listening, everybody.